Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. um, I have a couple of things I want us to do before we get started. First of all, I need to make sure everybody is on the College Board's website. I'm going to start giving you assignments there. So if you haven't been able to get on, you need to let me know and get that taken care of quickly. Excuse me. So I've got some assignments up there now that won't be due till Friday. It's basically just watching 2 videos and completing a little quiz. It's just kind of like the play pause it questions. Basically, it goes with the video. College Board has started putting short 8-minute, 9-minute coverings of the stuff that we're going to be covering. Just a short lecture. And so we'll start doing those. And I'll be able to see when you've done them, so make sure you do them so I can give you participation credit for that. And then the quiz that goes afterwards. Also, we have a new tool called Gizmo, which I'm going to start using. If you've looked at the today's folder, you'll see instructions for getting on Gizmo, and there's an assignment that goes with the Gizmo. It's basically a simulation. So let me show that real quick. Okay, so basically it's got a link here on in the folder, and log in or enroll, and here's the class code. It's very similar to the College Boards. You're going to have to set up your own account. It's not one like so many of the other things we do that's automatically linked to your Gmail. You are actually going to have to set up an account and enroll in the class with the class code. Now, if you lose your username and password, I think there's a way I can recover it, but please don't do it. Just make sure you have this isn't something through the school, so I can't just look something up real quick and let you log in. Make sure you use something, write it down somewhere so you can get onto it. So we'll start doing some assignments there. They've got some good simulations about the different cycles, and there's some really good ones about biodiversity, and we'll be doing several of them throughout the year. So go ahead and get enrolled in that at some point today. Like I said, there is an assignment there for you. So if you don't mind, after lecture today, go ahead and try to get in there. And also the College Board. The College Board is more than just the assignments I'm giving you. The counselor's office uses that to figure out who's taking the test and all of that kind of thing. So you to get in there, the school needs you to log in there. For the College Board, we prefer you not use your school email, because they want it to follow you wherever you go. If you transfer schools, or if you're, if something happens with the school email and they change it, they prefer you to use your home email for the College Board. If you've already used your school email, you can go on and change that. So, but anyway, there's a lot of good resources there. We'll be doing, we'll soon be taking our tests there, so it's very important you get onto it. And there's other things they have all kinds of stuff on there for you to help get ready for the exam. So there's self-checks and practice tests, all kinds of stuff. So we'll be using
Where
that.
do we find that?
On the College Board?
Yeah.
Where do you find what?
I don't know the College Board. What is that? I don't.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I entered late, so I don't know if I missed anything.
Okay, that's all right. College Board is the company that basically runs the AP exams and the SATs and lots of college entrance exams, and not just college entrance exams, all kinds of testing. And they run the AP exam, like I said, and they have a website, and somewhere I have a link to it.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering. Like, how exactly would I get to it?
Okay, I think I sent everyone that hadn't signed up for it yet an email that should have a link on it. And
did you send that today, or is that like?
No, it was a couple of days ago.
Okay, let me go check my email then, because
okay, well, I will make sure after class to put a link on the Schoology page as well.
Okay, awesome.
So, but yeah, we're going to be using it a lot, so make sure you get enrolled in that. And I have a class code for that as well. That will be on the email I sent you. And but I'll put that on Schoology as well. Okay, so I guess that's all today. Did anybody have trouble with the PowerPoint water cycle thing? Did it work all right for everybody? Okay, I see some nodding heads. I got one email that said the dice wasn't working for them, but they used a real die and it worked. They just did it that way. I usually do that in person with real dice and stations around the classroom that you walk around. But I thought the PowerPoint was a pretty good way to do it since we can't do that in this year. So anyway, the water cycle is pretty easy. You should be very familiar with that. Now we're going to start talking about the carbon cycle, which is, again, not hugely complicated, but it's not something you've learned about since first grade like the water cycle. So let me get that started. Oh, I see what the problem is. I'm still sharing my Schoology screen. Okay. Now we'll do it this way. Okay. All right, so now we're starting. Sorry, my dog's chasing a cat. I'm gonna stop it. Something I don't usually have to worry about in the classroom. Okay, so nutrient cycles. Every organism needs nutrients for their tissues. We talked about there's only a handful of elements that most of our bodies are made up of. And the way to remember that is SPONCH. S for sulfur, P for phosphorus, O oxygen, N nitrogen, C carbon, and then H hydrogen. A lot of those things are readily available. Some of them are not. And those nutrients go through pathways or cycles. The ones we're going to talk about now are carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus. Okay, chemical substances you need are called nutrients. Every organism needs nutrients to build tissues, and nutrients pass through several biogeochemical cycles. Nutrient, we tend to use it just thinking about food, but nutrient does not necessarily mean the main part of food is the carbohydrates that you need for energy. The nutrients are the other things. So vitamins, things that aren't necessarily the carbohydrates, it's the other stuff. So you can talk about plants needing nutrients even though they don't eat. Okay, so oxygen is pretty important to us and to most life. It participates in the carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus cycles by combining with them. Oxygen gas in the atmosphere is released by photosynthesis, and it's used in respiration by all multicellular forms of life, many single-celled organisms as well. It's really easy to fall into the trap that animals use oxygen, plants use carbon dioxide. It doesn't work that way. Remember that everything, even plants, does cellular respiration, and you need oxygen for cellular respiration. Plants are in the situation where they've made, it's kind of weird that they have to do it this way, but the only thing that plants have figured out how to do to make from the sunlight is sugar. So they make sugar from sunlight. But in order to use sugar, you have to break the sugar down to release the energy that the cells can use. So plants make carbohydrates and then break the carbohydrates. So everything does cellular respiration. Every living thing does cellular respiration one way or another. So you've got to remember that it's not plants doing photosynthesis, animals doing cellular respiration. You actually have fish kills in places where there's a lot of algae, because at night, this happens at night, because the plant, if you get a lot of algae, you would think there'd be tons of oxygen in the water. Well, there is in the daytime. So the plants are producing all this oxygen in the daytime, and then at night, they start breaking down their carbohydrates by using oxygen. And if you've got too much algae in the water, they can actually suck all the oxygen out of the water, and then the fish die. So, because again, fish are breathing oxygen from the water. We've talked about that. So they have to be able to, if there's no oxygen in the water, their gills aren't going to do any good and they're going to die. So I'm sorry I harp on this, but this is a real common mistake. I can remember thinking the same thing when I was in high school, that, oh, animals respiration, plants photosynthesis. I've heard people talking about grading the AP exam and seeing people making these mistakes. It's very important that you keep that straight. Okay? Every living thing does cellular respiration and uses oxygen in some form. Okay, we've already done that. So, so the carbon cycle. Carbon cycle is in the news a lot lately because we're tweaking it a lot that we shouldn't be doing, and it's probably going to be causing us problems more and more so. And something you need to remember about climate change is we can't say that the hurricane or the drought or anything was caused by global climate change, global warming. We can say that those things are more likely to happen because of climate change, but you can't look at any one particular hurricane and say this was caused by climate change. But there's a lot of things that are going to happen. It's going to be overall warmer, more droughts in some places, more hurricanes. So the fact that we're in a terrible drought right now, is it because we've been burning carbon dioxide? Maybe. That's all we can say. So anyway, carbon is a major component of all organic compounds: carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Life as we know it is based on carbon. Carbon has all kinds of interesting chemistry that we're not going to really go into that makes it, and you're able to make incredible amounts of different compounds with carbon. There's a whole branch of chemistry, organic chemistry, that's just about carbon compounds. So carbon, you can't do that with nitrogen. You know, nitrogen makes a certain number of compounds, but not like carbon. Mainly carbon can link to itself, so you can have huge chains. You can, like DNA is a ginormous molecule, and it's only possible because of carbon. There's only, I think the only other element that it's possible to do the things that carbon does is silicon. And so people wonder if there might be silicon-based life somewhere else, but on Earth, it's all carbon. Life is based on carbon. Carbon dioxide is continuously exchanged through chemical and physical processes between the atmosphere and the oceans. So even without cellular respiration or photosynthesis, carbon dioxide goes from the air into the oceans and back. It can also be sequestered underground. It can be formed into carbonate rocks. You can remove carbon from the atmosphere and isolate it for long periods of time. Okay, so this is stuff you learned in biology, at least. Plants take in carbon dioxide during photosynthesis and use the carbon to build carbohydrates. Carbohydrates then pass through food webs to consumers. And here's the typical photosynthesis equation. You need to know this. You've learned it in biology. Carbon dioxide plus water makes sugar and oxygen. So basically, and this still blows my mind, plants make their own bodies from air and sunlight. You know, one of the classic experiments where they first figured this out is someone planted a tree in a pot, a smallish pot, weighed it, and then watered it and all that for several years until the tree was pretty big, and then weighed it again. Because always before they thought the plants got their body parts, the stuff they build their bodies, from the soil. And this guy weighed the tree and found out it weighed way more than it did before, and there's nowhere else it could have gotten that material than the air. So when you look at a tree, just remember that's made of air and sunlight. It's just amazing. Blows my mind still. But anyway, this is carbon dioxide being taken out of the atmosphere. Organisms everything, plants, animals, bacteria, anything alive, releases carbon in the form of carbon dioxide gas by respiration. Also, when organisms die, decomposers break down the bodies and they release the carbon back into the environment. So not only is it released from breathing or from cellular respiration, but when a tree dies and rots, that carbon goes back into the cycle in one form or another. Some of it turns into carbon dioxide. Sometimes during rotting, methane is produced, and methane is CH4. So the carbon in the body is released into the system in one way or another. Geological forces can turn accumulated carbon into carbon-containing rocks or fossil fuels. So coal, oil, natural gas, that's all from dead or living organisms that have been buried, and geologic forces, heat, pressure, turn them into various different fossil fuels or carbon-containing rocks. Limestone is full of carbon. It's also released by volcanic activity. Volcanoes release lots and lots of carbon dioxide. Human activities such as burning fossil fuels and burning forests. When you burn a forest, you take all the carbon that's been stored in the plants and release it into the atmosphere. Okay, carbon reservoirs. Carbon is stored in various places on Earth. It's not always in the atmosphere. Sometimes for relatively short periods of time, plants in the soil. Sometimes for longer periods of time. Methane and carbon dioxide are stored in the permafrost. The deep sea stores a lot of methane and carbon dioxide. Coal, oil, and natural gas deep underground, that's all carbon reservoirs. So here's the problem with the fossil fuels and melting the permafrost. When the permafrost melts, that frozen organic matter that's been building up very slowly over thousands or millions of years, releasing carbon into the atmosphere that's been isolated since at least the last ice age. All those plants we talked about in the tundra, where there's permafrost, the plants grow in their very short growing season, take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and then get frozen. They can't rot when they're frozen, so they can't release their carbon. And so over time, and it's very slowly because the growing season is really short, all that they're taking and storing carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and storing it in the frozen ice. But when it melts, all that stuff is being released, and so we're releasing thousands of years worth of carbon into the atmosphere. Fossil fuels are even worse because they've been removed from the atmosphere for millions of years, and it may have taken millions of years for them to build that back up. And so when you're burning fossil fuels, you're adding millions of years of carbon back into the atmosphere. Carbon that's been stored underground for millions of years, took millions of years to build up. So it's a lot of carbon. And so that's why it's a big deal. And we're going to talk about some of this stuff later, but if you burn a fire in your fireplace to heat your house, you're not affecting the carbon cycle that much because the carbon was in the tree that you burned had only been there for maximum amount of time, 100 years. And the firewood you're burning is usually not from really old trees. So you're burning the wood and it's sending that carbon back into the atmosphere. Not a huge impact. But when you burn coal in your fireplace, that is releasing stuff that's been stored out of the carbon cycle millions of years ago, and you're dumping it in. So this is just to give you an idea of how this works. When we aren't tapping the reservoirs, you've got carbon moving in and out of the cycle at a steady state. Just like if you're putting water into a bathtub at the same rate it's draining out, the water level will stay the same. Normally, that's what's going on. If you, like I said, firewood, biofuels is what that is. If you're making fuel from sugarcane, you're not affecting this. You're using the stuff that's in the atmosphere normally. If we're releasing carbon faster than it can be taken up, carbon levels increase. So a forest fire might do that. If you're burning a lot of deforestation, you're chopping down forests, burning lots of forest, you can make the carbon level increase because you're releasing it faster than it can be taken back up. What we're actually doing right now is this, because we're adding another pipe into our bathtub, because we have the regular cycle and then we're pouring in carbon from underground and from other places that hadn't been released for millions of years. Okay, and we'll talk about this more as the year goes on, because this is one of the big things in environmental science right now. That doesn't seem right. Hold on a second. I guess it is. So, okay, so that's basically the carbon cycle. And it's photosynthesis, cellular respiration, and then all the stuff we're adding back in, all the ways we're adding more carbon, burning down trees, digging up fossil fuels, all of that kind of thing. So what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and get into Gizmo and look at the assignment. Once you've gotten into Gizmo and joined the class and you see the assignment, you can go ahead and leave. But I'd like you to try to do that before you leave, just in case we need help. This is my first time to use it, so hopefully everything's working right. Okay? If you need any help, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the College Board on Schoology while you're doing that.